The first thing I noticed was the lemon. Not the classroom, not the calendar, not the impossible fact that I was 17 again with my hair tied in a crooked ribbon and my final year blazer hanging loose from my shoulders. It was the lemon, sliced into a glass jug on the teacher's desk, floating beside mint leaves like tiny yellow warning signs. In my first life, that jug had tipped over during lunch period and soaked the sign-up sheet for the most expensive shared tutor in Ashbourne Academy. Everyone laughed. Someone shouted that even the universe wanted us to prepare properly, and I, stupid, grateful, desperate little me, wrote my name under Elodie Vales because I thought survival meant staying close to the girl everyone trusted. In this life, the jug was still full, the sign-up sheet was still dry, and Elodie was standing beside it with a silver pen in one hand and the calm smile of a person who had already decided which sheep would walk into the pen. "Mira," she called across the room, sweet enough to make heads turn. "You're joining us, aren't you? We're splitting Professor Wren's notes. No one passes the national final alone." I looked at the lemon slices bumping softly against the glass and remembered the last page of my disciplinary notice. Cohort-wide academic misconduct. Primary organizer, Mira Arden. Recommendation, permanent removal from merit consideration. Then I smiled back at Elodie and said the smallest, most dangerous word in my second life.
No.
The classroom did not explode. That was the cruel thing about changing your fate. Sometimes the first crack in destiny sounded exactly like a chair scraping the floor. Around us, 36 students froze over their lunch boxes, phones, practice papers, and half-finished coffee bottles. The national final was 6 weeks away, and at Ashbourne, 6 weeks before the exam was not school anymore. It was war disguised as revision. Every desk had flashcards stacked like ammunition. Every corridor smelled of instant noodles and panic. Every conversation turned into a comparison of predicted ranks, mock scores, scholarship cutoffs, and how many hours someone had slept, as if exhaustion itself deserved applause. Elodie Vale had ruled that battlefield since year 9. She was class monitor, scholarship ambassador, student council speaker, teacher's favorite, parents' example, and the kind of girl whose mistakes were treated as proof she worked too hard. In my first life, she had saved my seat in her tutoring group with a little wave and a whisper. "You're good at explaining things. We need you." Those 4 words had fed the starving part of me that wanted to belong.
So I joined.
I typed summaries. I corrected equations. I rewrote messy explanations into clear notes. I stayed awake while everyone slept and uploaded polished versions to the shared folder before dawn. When the notes later matched a banned commercial answer pack word for word, when half the cohort repeated the same incorrect essay framework, when the final results collapsed and the school needed one student to blame, Elodie's lashes trembled, the tutor denied everything, and every edited file carried my name. In this life, I kept my hands folded on the desk and watched her smile tighten. "You're not joining?" Elodie repeated, as if I had said I planned to chew glass for breakfast. She stepped closer, and the room's attention followed her the way iron filings follow a magnet. "Mira, don't be proud. Professor Wren coached the provincial top scorer last year. His materials are impossible to get unless we hire him together. One person cannot afford him." That was true, which was why the trap had worked so beautifully before. Wren was not a professor. His real name was Ren Liao, a former curriculum assistant dismissed 3 years earlier for selling prediction packs after signing a confidentiality agreement. In my first life, none of us knew that until the hearing, and even then the school buried his name because wealthy parents had paid him through private accounts. Elodie had introduced him as Professor Wren because a false title sounded less criminal when spoken by a girl with perfect braids and a charity badge pinned to her lapel. I had discovered his background too late, after my scholarship vanished, and my mother stopped looking me in the eye at dinner. But rebirth is not forgiveness. Rebirth is memory sharpened into a knife. I lifted my water bottle, drank slowly, and said, "I'm using the official syllabus this time." A boy near the window snorted. Someone whispered, "This time?" Elodie's eyes flicked, just once. She had heard it. Good. Let her wonder. Let her think I was stressed, arrogant, unstable, whatever made her comfortable enough to keep walking toward the cliff. The first interruption came from Damon Quill, who had ranked third in our cohort and behaved like every sentence was an investment opportunity. He leaned back in his chair, grinning with the careless confidence of someone whose parents donated a wing to the library. "Official syllabus?" he said. "That's adorable. The official syllabus is written for parents, Mira. The real exam is always about patterns." He tapped the sign-up sheet. "Patterns cost money." A few students laughed. In my first life, that laugh would have burned me. I had been poor enough to understand that money did not just buy resources. It bought permission to be believed. When rich students gathered around a tutor, it was extra support. When I produced clear notes, it was suspiciously polished. When Elodie copied my explanations into her own handwriting, it was collaboration. When I defended myself, it was deflection. Now I only looked at Damon and asked, "Then why split the notes?" His grin slipped. "What? If patterns cost money and Professor Wren is as valuable as you think, why would Elodie invite the whole class? Why not keep the advantage smaller?" The silence that followed was not complete, but it was useful. It made people look at Elodie. Not with doubt yet. Doubt takes time. But with the faint irritation of students suddenly realizing that generosity can be a leash. Elodie laughed first, soft and wounded. "Because I don't want anyone left behind." The sentence landed exactly as she intended. Noble.
Warm.
Impossible to question without looking selfish. In my first life, I had admired that kind of sentence. In this one, I heard the hook under the bait. By lunch, the rumor had already grown teeth. Mira thinks she is too good for the tutor. Mira is hiding her own notes. Mira probably has a private coach. Mira wants everyone else to fail. I heard it in the corridor, in the bathroom, behind the shelves in the library where girls pretended to look for textbooks while watching me between gaps. I let them talk. There is a strange freedom in being misread on purpose. Instead of defending myself, I went to the administration building and requested a printed copy of the final examination rules, not the student-friendly summary, but the complete candidate conduct booklet with the annexes no one read. The secretary, Mrs. Palin, blinked at me over her half-moon glasses. The full booklet is 38 pages. I know. Most students use the overview. Most students are going to fail, I said, then regretted it when her eyebrows lifted. I softened my voice. I prefer details. She studied me for a long moment. In my first life, Mrs. Palin had sat behind a panel table while I cried and asked why nobody checked the edit history properly. She had not been cruel, only tired, and tired adults are often more dangerous than cruel ones because they want the easiest ending. This time, when she handed me the booklet, I asked one more question. If a student receives paid external materials suspected of matching restricted examiner content, who do they report it to before the final? Mrs. Palin stopped sorting paper clips. Why would you need to know that? I looked at the lemon yellow notice on her wall about academic integrity, then back at her. Because I'm trying not to become convenient. That afternoon, Elodie sent me a message with a smiling emoji and no warmth behind it. Are you upset with me? I left it unread until evening. In my first life, I would have answered instantly, apologized for sounding rude, explained myself into a smaller and smaller corner until she could forgive me publicly and punish me privately. This time, I made tea, opened the conduct booklet, and built a wall out of rules. Clause 4.2. Candidates must not knowingly use unauthorized predictive materials marketed as derived from confidential examination sources. Clause 4.5. Students who distribute, edit, convert, summarize, or adapt unauthorized materials are treated as participants, not passive recipients. Clause 7.1. Identical errors across a cohort may trigger statistical review. Clause 8.3. Withdrawal from a collaboration group prior to receipt of materials must be documented before investigation begins. There it was. The door I had not known existed in my first life. Prior to receipt. Not after. Not once the poison notes touched your hands. Before. I took a screenshot of my unanswered message, then typed carefully. I'm not upset. I'm declining the shared tutor group and won't receive, edit, summarize, rewrite, or use any of Professor Wren's materials. Good luck with your preparation. I sent it to Elodie, copied it to myself by email, printed the confirmation, and placed it inside a folder labeled with the most boring title possible. Independent Revision Plan. Boring things survive disasters. Nobody steals what looks dull. The second day brought the performance. Elodie arrived with pastries from the expensive bakery near the station and placed the pink box on the center table before morning registration. For the tutoring group, she announced, then glanced at me with manufactured concern. And Mira too, of course, even though she's preparing separately. It was a perfect move. If I took one, I looked hypocritical. If I refused, I looked bitter. The old me would have frozen. The new me opened the box, selected the smallest custard tart, and said, "Thank you. I'm not allergic to pastry, just fraud." Someone choked on coffee. Damon laughed before he could stop himself. Elodie's face did not change, but the hand holding the box tightened. "That's a serious word," she said. "So is failed," I answered. "So is barred. So is voided." The room shifted. Not enough to save them, but enough to make some students uncomfortable. Pattern disruption is not always shouting. Sometimes it is naming the future in a room where everyone is pretending not to see the shape of it. Elodie recovered beautifully. She placed one hand on her chest and smiled at the class. "I think pressure is getting to all of us. Let's be kind." There was again, kindness as a gag. I bit into the custard tart and let sugar coat my tongue while half the room decided I had become cruel. Maybe I had. My first life had taught me that gentleness without boundaries is just a door left unlocked. For the next week, I became invisible on purpose. Not hidden exactly. Present enough to be seen studying, absent enough to be excluded from whatever the tutoring group produced. I moved from the main library to the old archive room behind the geography department, where the chairs were ugly, the windows stuck halfway open, and nobody came unless they needed maps of rivers that had changed names before our parents were born. I built my revision from official sources only, past papers released by the examination board, marking commentaries, syllabus outcomes, errata notices, sample responses, examiner reports, and the tiny, not accessible footnotes students loved to ignore. It was not glamorous. It did not make me feel like I had a secret weapon. It made me feel like a farmer turning soil with a spoon. But every page was clean. Every explanation was mine. Every mistake belonged to me and could be corrected without becoming evidence. Meanwhile, the shared tutor group grew into a religion. They met in seminar room 3 after school, then moved to Elodie's house on weekends because her dining table could seat 18. The rest joined by video call. They divided subjects like territories. Damon took constitutional structures. Priya took case comparisons. Jules took statistical interpretation. Elodie coordinated, which meant she collected everyone's labor, polished it into one voice, and uploaded the master file under a folder called Golden Final Pack. I knew the name because people kept mentioning it near me, loudly, as if envy could be summoned by repetition. The first crack appeared on a Thursday when Priya found me in the archive room with red-rimmed eyes and a folder hugged to her chest. Priya had never been my friend, but she had never enjoyed cruelty either, which made her dangerous to Elodie in a quieter way. "Can I ask you something?" she whispered. I nodded without closing my book. She sat opposite me and looked around as if the old maps might report her. "You said not to use Wren's materials. Did you mean because they're leaked?" I did not answer immediately. In my first life, Priya had cried at the hearing after her scores were voided, saying she thought the notes were just predictions. Her parents had refinanced their shop to pay for her school fees. She had never mocked me, never defended me, never mattered enough for me to hate her. This life gave me a choice, and I hated how heavy it felt. "I mean," I said carefully, "if a tutor claims to know exact question patterns before the exam, you should ask how." Priya swallowed. "Elodie says he has insight. So, do weather apps. They still get storms wrong." Priya almost smiled, then opened her folder. Inside was a printed page with Wren's crest at the top and a heading that made my stomach turn: Mandatory Final Essay Frame. I recognized it from my first life. The frame had failed thousands of answers because the actual exam reversed the assumption. "Don't show me more," I said sharply, pushing back from the table. She flinched. I lowered my voice. I mean it. I cannot receive those materials. Neither should you. Document when you leave the group if you leave. Priya's fingers tightened on the folder. They'll say I'm betraying everyone. They will, I said. Then the exam will say worse. Priya did not leave. That was the part people forget in revenge stories. Warnings do not magically save everyone. Some people hear the fire alarm and still go back for their favorite shoes. She returned to seminar room 3 that afternoon, sat beside Elodie, and helped split the master file into color-coded sections. I saw her through the glass door, face pale under the fluorescent light, choosing belonging over doubt because belonging is warm and doubt is lonely. I did not judge her as much as I wanted to. I knew that loneliness had teeth. On Friday, the tutoring group received Ren's second pack. By Monday, they had stopped attending regular revision clinics because Ren's notes were more efficient. By Wednesday, students outside our class began begging for access, and Elodie allowed it after collecting printing contributions. That was new. In my first life, the fraud had stayed mostly inside our cohort until the final. This time, my refusal had wounded Elodie's pride, and pride makes greedy people careless. She wanted the entire grade to see that her plan worked without me. She wanted my isolation to become a lesson, so she spread the notes wider. Every wider circle made the eventual blast larger. I watched names appear in the shared folder invitations reflected in other students' laptop screens, and each time, I wrote down the date, the room, the witnesses, and the exact phrase I heard. I did not hack. I did not steal. I did not touch the poison file. I simply noticed. In my first life, they had used my diligence against me. In this one, I gave my diligence a different address. 3 weeks before the final, our homeroom teacher, Mr. Say, announced a compulsory integrity briefing. The old me would have felt hope. The new me felt suspicion. Ashbourne Academy loved briefings because briefings created the appearance of prevention after adults had already ignored the problem. Mr. Say stood at the front with a slideshow titled Fair Preparation and Candidate Responsibility, looking exhausted enough to be honest. External tutoring is allowed, he said, but students must ensure materials are legitimate. Damon raised his hand. How are we supposed to know if a professional tutor's materials are legitimate? We're students. It was a clever question, designed to make responsibility look unreasonable. Mr. Say adjusted his glasses. If a tutor claims confidential access, guarantees exact question coverage, uses restricted examiner language, or discourages you from using official documents, report it. Elodie's face remained serene. Around her, students stared at their desks. Damon leaned back as if bored. I felt the room choose silence. Then Mr. Say clicked to the next slide and my breath caught. There was clause 8.3, the same withdrawal rule from my folder, highlighted in blue. If you withdraw from a study group due to concerns, he continued, document it clearly before receiving suspect materials. Several heads turned toward me. Elodie's did not. She was too disciplined for that. But her pen stopped moving. For one beautiful second, she understood that I had not merely refused her. I had placed myself outside the blast radius, using a rule she had not read. After the briefing, Elodie cornered me beside the trophy cabinet where gold cups collected dust under the names of students the school remembered only when donors visited. She stood close enough that her perfume filled my throat, something floral and expensive with a bitter edge. What did you tell them? She asked softly.
No audience now. No pastries, no kindness, no smile.
Just the girl underneath the ribbon. I asked for the rules. You're trying to ruin us. No, I said. I'm trying not to be ruined with you. Her eyes flashed. You think you're special because you study alone? You think official papers will save you? The final is not about honesty, Mira. It's about ranking. Everyone uses whatever advantage they can get. I looked at our reflections in the glass trophy case. Elodie polished and bright, me tired and thin, both of us trapped among old victories. That's what you said at the hearing, I replied. The words slipped out before I could stop them. She froze. What hearing? Pattern interruption. Dangerous. I had not meant to show that much memory. I tilted my head and smiled faintly. The one you'll imagine every night if this goes badly. For once, Elodie had no perfect answer. She stepped back, and I saw something raw across her face. Not guilt. Not fear exactly. Calculation. If she could not pull me back in, she would need to push me farther out. The push came as a rumor with polished shoes. By the next morning, half the grade believed I had reported the tutoring group because I was jealous. By lunch, the story had improved. I had begged to join late, been rejected, and retaliated. By dismissal, someone had added that my mother could not afford the fee, which was true enough to sting and false enough to spread. In my first life, poverty had been used like a stain. Teachers lowered their voices around it. Students decorated it with pity. Elodie weaponized it without ever saying the cruelest part aloud. This time, I did not defend myself. I went home, helped my mother sort invoices at the kitchen table, and told her I would be staying late at school for independent revision. She looked up from the electricity bill with worry tucked between her brows. Are you eating? Mostly. Are they bothering you? I could have lied. Instead I said, yes, but less successfully than before. She stared at me, confused by the before. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. In my first life, shame had turned me secretive. I had hidden the tutoring fee, hidden the group pressure, hidden the hearing notice until hiding became another rope around my neck. This time, I opened my folder and showed her my withdrawal message, my official syllabus, my printed rules. Not everything. Not rebirth. But enough. My mother read quietly, then said, "Good. Keep copies outside the house." That was when I remembered she had survived worse people than Elodie Vale before I was old enough to notice. So I made copies. One set stayed in my school locker. One went into a cloud drive under a dull file name. One went to my mother's old email. One sealed envelope went to Mrs. Palin with a note, records of my withdrawal from the shared tutoring group and independent preparation, submitted before the final in case of later review. She accepted it with an expression that told me adults dislike being made responsible on paper.
Good.
Paper makes cowardice harder. Meanwhile, the golden final pack became more famous than the official exam itself. Students stopped asking what the syllabus said and started asking what Elodie's table said. They memorized Ren's guaranteed essay openings, his non-negotiable phrases, his model structure, his universal conclusion, and his list of supposedly excluded topics. That last part mattered. In my first life, the final had heavily tested 2 topics Ren marked as low probability. Students who trusted him left those pages blank, then panicked and filled the gaps with copied frameworks. The statistical review flagged identical wrong assumptions across the cohort. Elodie escaped because her father hired a lawyer who argued she had been misled by peer-distributed notes. I became the peer. This time, without my edits, the notes were worse.
Sloppier.
More obviously commercial. Ren's watermark appeared faintly behind some pages. A mislabeled graph repeated across copies. A fabricated case name had a spelling mistake, so unique it might as well have been a fingerprint. I knew because students complained about them aloud while I walked past. They thought errors were annoying. They did not understand errors were breadcrumbs. The second interruption came from an unexpected place, Ren himself. He appeared outside the school gates 10 days before the final, wearing a camel coat and sunglasses despite the cloudy weather, looking exactly like a man who had learned authority from hotel lobbies. Students gathered around him as if a celebrity had descended. Elodie stood at his side, glowing with ownership. I watched from across the street beside a chestnut tree, holding a bag of groceries for my mother and feeling my first life crawl under my skin. I remembered his voice at the hearing, smooth through the speakerphone. I never instructed students to distribute restricted content. Any edits or summaries were made by students independently. I remembered everyone turning toward me. I remembered Elodie crying. Nauren was laughing while Damon asked whether the final would include comparative ethics, and Ren said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Do not waste time on ethics. The board has moved away from that." My fingers tightened around the grocery bag. The official errata notice in my folder, released 2 days earlier, had clarified that ethics would be integrated across all sections. Ren had not read it. He was selling old predictions dressed as insider knowledge. That should have relieved me. Instead, it made me furious. Not because the cohort would fail. Because so many of them were not evil, only frightened, and frightened students will hand their futures to anyone who speaks with certainty. Ren saw children drowning and rented them stones. I crossed the street before I could convince myself not to. Elodie saw me first. Her smile sharpened. Mira, changed your mind? A few students laughed. Ren turned his sunglasses toward me. This is the independent one? He asked, amused. The one who believes in official documents? I stopped 2 steps away, close enough to smell his aftershave. Do you know the board released an errata update on integrated ethics? The laughter thinned. Ren's mouth curved. Of course. Then why did you just tell them not to study it? He removed his sunglasses slowly, performing patience. Because some of us understand emphasis. Students who chase every notice waste valuable time. Students who ignore official updates fail official exams, I said. A murmur moved through the group. Elodie stepped between us, graceful as a knife sliding into a sheath. Mira, this is embarrassing. Please don't harass our tutor, because you feel left out. There it was, the public framing.
Before, it would have trapped me.
Now I looked past her to the students holding notebooks, phones, hopes. Ask him for written confirmation, I said. If he is certain, ask him to put his advice in writing with his full legal name. Ren's face changed. Not much. Enough. Then he laughed and clapped once. Exams make students dramatic. He left 5 minutes later. That evening, Elodie told the group my outburst proved I was unstable. But 3 students downloaded the errata notice. Only 3. Sometimes 3 is enough. The final week arrived like a fever. Posters went up reminding us to bring candidate IDs, black pens, clear water bottles, and no unauthorized notes. Teachers spoke gently, which made everyone more terrified. The shared tutor group moved with the hollow-eyed unity of a cult near sunrise. They repeated Ren's phrases under their breath in corridors. They split flashcard decks. They quizzed each other on forbidden certainty. I studied alone in the archive room, then in the public library, then at our kitchen table, while my mother cut fruit beside me and pretended not to watch my hands shake. I was not fearless. That is another lie revenge stories tell. Memory did not make me invincible. It made me responsible for every step. What if the exam changed from my first life? What if the board did not investigate? What if Elodie found a way to attach my name anyway? What if refusing the group saved me from fraud, but not from failure? Fear sat beside me each night like another student, turning pages with cold fingers. So I fed it evidence. I reviewed official essays. I wrote practice answers by hand. I timed myself. I made mistakes privately until they stopped appearing publicly. On the night before the final, Elodie sent one last message. I hope you know it's not too late to apologize. We can still send you the summary. I stared at the screen for a long time. The old me would have cried with relief. The new me typed, please do not send me any material from Professor Ren or the shared tutor group. Then I turned off my phone and slept for 4 hours without dreaming. Final mornings smelled like rain and printer toner. Ashbourne Academy's examination hall had been stripped of everything human. No posters, no plants, no colorful notices, only rows of desks under white lights and a clock large enough to accuse us all. Students filed in clutching transparent pencil cases and nerves. Elodie wore her hair in a low braid tied with a blue ribbon, the same style she wore in my first life at the hearing when she told the panel she had trusted me completely. Damon looked pale. Priya avoided my eyes. I found my assigned desk near the left aisle, placed my ID at the corner, and rested both hands flat on the wood. No notes. No group folder.
No vote certainty.
Just me. Before the papers were distributed, the chief invigilator read the conduct warning aloud. Any candidate found to have used, distributed, or relied upon unauthorized predictive materials may have results withheld pending review. Identical language or repeated non-standard errors may be investigated. The words moved through the hall like a draft under a door. I saw Damon's jaw tighten. I saw Priya close her eyes. I saw Elodie remain perfectly still. Then the papers landed face down on our desks. "You may begin." I turned mine over and almost laughed. Section 1. Integrated Ethics. Section 2. Comparative Analysis on the topic Ren had marked excluded. Section 3. A data interpretation problem using the exact graph type his pack had mislabeled. Not the same final as my first life, not entirely. Worse for them.
Cleaner for me.
Halfway through the exam, the hall changed temperature. Not literally, maybe, but fear has its own weather. Pens slowed. Pages stopped turning. Someone sniffed hard near the back. Damon raised his hand for extra paper, then stared at it blankly when it came. Elodie wrote quickly at first, then paused for so long that the invigilator glanced at her twice. I kept my head down. Pattern disruption belongs in preparation, not performance. On Section 2, I answered from the official commentary and added a limitation Ren's framework would never allow. On Section 3, I corrected the graph label before interpreting it. On ethics, I wrote until my fingers cramped. The old me had always been capable. That was the tragedy. They had convinced me capability needed permission, packaging, a group chat, a tutor with a fake title, a golden girl's approval. But competence is quieter than confidence, and often stronger. When the invigilator called time, I put down my pen. Around me, students looked as if they had been dragged from deep water. Elodie stood first. She turned, found me, and smiled. Not triumphantly, not warmly. A warning. Whatever had happened in that hall, she was already preparing the story. By sunset, the story arrived. The final was unfair. The board had tested outside scope. Independent students had probably received different guidance, and Mira had known something. I read the messages from a secondary class group I had never joined, but someone forwarded anyway. Then I opened my official booklet and waited. Results were supposed to take 12 days. They took 23. That delay did more damage than any announcement could have. At first, the cohort complained loudly. Then the school sent a notice. Certain results are undergoing routine verification. Routine is a word institutions use when they want panic to sit politely. Parents began calling. Students stopped laughing in corridors. Elodie continued smiling, but her face grew thinner, as if the smile required more muscle each day. Damon stopped coming to school. Priya found me outside the archive room and whispered, "Did you pass?" "I don't know. Did you report us?" I looked at her, and this time, I let the silence hurt. "I warned you." Her eyes filled. "I know. That was the first apology I received across 2 lives, and it was not enough to fix anything, but it was enough to keep me from hating her completely." On the 24th day, Ashbourne called an emergency assembly for all final year candidates. The auditorium filled with the kind of quiet that exists only before a verdict. Teachers lined the walls. Parents had been invited, which meant the school wanted witnesses. On the stage stood the principal, Mrs. Palin, Mr. Say, and 2 people in dark suits with examination board badges. Elodie sat 3 rows ahead of me, spine straight. Her father sat beside her, already angry. My mother sat beside me, one hand folded over mine, thumb steady against my knuckles. The board representative did not waste time. Her name was Director Havel, and she had the voice of a door closing. Following statistical review of the national final, the board identified repeated unauthorized language, identical non-standard errors, and shared structural templates across a significant number of submissions from this institution. A rustle moved through the auditorium. Further investigation connected these submissions to an external paid tutor operating under a false academic title and distributing materials marketed as derived from confidential examination insight. Elodie's father stood. "Are you accusing children of cheating because they used a tutor?" Director Havel looked at him without blinking. "Sit down, Mr. Vale." He sat. Not because he wanted to, but because everyone watched him realize she knew his name. That was the 3rd interruption, the one that broke the performance. Director Havel continued, "External tutoring is permitted. Unauthorized predictive materials, restricted language, and coordinated distribution are not. Candidates who received, edited, divided, summarized, or reproduced the identified materials will have the relevant submissions failed." Candidates involved in distribution may face further sanction. The auditorium erupted. Students cried out. Parents demanded names.
Teachers tried to quiet them.
Elodie remained still, but her blue ribbon trembled at the end of her braid. Then Director Hovell lifted a folder. We also received prior documentation from one candidate declining participation before receipt of materials and confirming independent preparation. My mother's grip tightened. Elodie turned her head slowly. For once, every eye did not protect her. Every eye followed hers to me. I did not stand. I did not smile. I let the room look. In my first life, public attention had felt like being skinned. This time, it felt like weather passing over a roof I had finally repaired. Director Hovell did not say my name, but she did not need to. Mrs. Pallen's envelope had done its work. The withdrawal message, the printed conduct clauses, the date-stamped note, the refusal to receive materials, the warning about the errata notice, all of it formed a shape too boring and too solid to knock down. Elodie's father stood again, red-faced. My daughter coordinated peer revision in good faith. If there was unauthorized material, she was misled. Director Hovell opened another folder. Your daughter processed payments for Mr. and Liao through a personal account, renamed his files to remove his watermark, and instructed classmates to divide sections before uploading a master pack. Elodie's perfect posture cracked. Her mother made a small sound beside her. Director Hovell added, We have file metadata, payment records voluntarily supplied by multiple families, and message logs. Miss Vale's final result is failed for academic misconduct. Her monitor commendation is withdrawn pending school disciplinary review. There are moments when a room does not gasp because shock is too large for lungs. Elodie stood as if pulled by a string. Mira edited the notes, she said. Her voice was clear, desperate, almost beautiful. She always edits everyone's notes. Check the files. Director Hovell turned a page. We did. Her account never accessed the folder. Her written refusal predates the first upload. Elodie looked at me then, not with hatred, but with disbelief, as if a door she had walked through 100 times had suddenly become a wall. The aftermath did not happen cleanly. It never does. The cohort did not all fail in the same way. Some had only used the summaries and lost marks on contaminated sections. Some had distributed files and faced misconduct records. Some, like Damon, had helped sell printed copies and were suspended from all board examinations for a year. Priya failed the final but avoided further sanction because she submitted evidence and admitted what happened. Elodie was removed as class monitor before Friday, failed for fraud, and barred from receiving any school merit endorsement. Ren disappeared for 3 days, then became the subject of a board referral and a civil complaint from parents who had paid him in cash and pride. The school tried to call it an unfortunate breach of trust. Students called it a massacre. Parents called lawyers. Teachers suddenly rediscovered the importance of official resources. Through it all, I kept attending independent revision sessions for the makeup scholarship assessment available only to candidates not under sanction. People looked at me differently after the assembly. Some with resentment, some with awe, some with the hungry curiosity reserved for survivors. A girl from another class approached me in the library and asked whether I had known the notes were fake from the beginning. I thought of lemon slices in water, of a tutor laughing outside the gate, of Priya's trembling folder, of my mother telling me to keep copies outside the house. I knew enough to stay clean, I said. It was the truest answer I could give without sounding insane. Elodie confronted me one last time behind the auditorium, where old stage props leaned against the wall under sheets of dust. It was raining outside, hard enough to blur the windows, and for a moment, she looked less like a golden girl than a painting left in the weather. You planned this, she said. No sweetness now. No audience. No need to perform kindness. You could have stopped everyone. That accusation, more than anything else, proved she had learned nothing. I tried. You made jokes. You acted superior. You scared Priya, but didn't save her. I told them not to use the materials. I told them to ask Ren for written confirmation. I told you I wouldn't receive anything. You heard me. You knew they would follow me. Her voice cracked on follow, and there it was, the heart of her grief.
Not that they failed.
That her power had finally produced a consequence she could not hand to someone else. I stepped closer.
Yes, because you trained them to.
You made doubt feel like betrayal. You made official rules feel childish. You made everyone believe your confidence was evidence. She flinched as if I had slapped her. And you, she whispered, you're innocent? I thought of my silence, my calculations, the satisfaction that had warmed me when Director Havel opened the folder. Innocent was too clean a word. No, I said. I'm free. Elodie laughed once, broken and ugly. You'll be alone. In my first life, that would have been a curse. This time, I looked toward the archive room where my books waited, toward the front gate where my mother would arrive with an umbrella, toward a future built on my own work. Then, at least the notes will be mine. The scholarship makeup assessment took place 2 weeks later in a smaller hall that smelled faintly of dust and new paper. Only 17 of us were eligible to sit it. Priya was not among them. Damon was not. Elodie's seat stayed empty, though someone had accidentally left her old name card in the supply box, and Mrs. Palin quietly removed it before the exam began. I wrote steadily, not perfectly, but honestly. When results came, I ranked second overall and first among eligible Ashbourne candidates. The school offered me a merit endorsement with language so polished it almost hid their embarrassment. I accepted it because refusing would have punished only me, and I was finished mistaking self-denial for dignity. At the end of year ceremony, Mr. Say introduced me as a student whose independence and integrity distinguished her preparation. The audience clapped. Some clapped because they meant it, some because they had to. My mother cried into a tissue and pretended she had dust in her eye. I walked across the stage without Elodie's shadow beside me, accepted the certificate, and felt nothing dramatic.
No Sander.
No music swelling, just the solid weight of paper in my hand and the knowledge that this time my name had reached the end attached to my own work. Years later, people would tell the story differently. They would say the class failed because of a corrupt tutor. They would say Elodie Vale was ambitious, not malicious. They would say Ashbourne became stricter after the Wren incident, as if an incident is something that happens by itself, like rain. Very few would mention the girl who declined a shared tutor while everyone laughed. Fewer would remember the printed refusal, the boring folder, the archive room, the official syllabus highlighted until the pages softened at the corners. That was fine. I did not need the legend. Legends are too easy to steal. I kept the first page of my independent revision plan in a frame above my desk, not because it was beautiful, but because it reminded me of the day I learned that refusing can be an action, silence can be evidence, and walking away before the poison is passed around can save your life. The lemon from that first morning stayed in my memory longer than Elodie's tears. Bright, sour, ordinary. A small warning floating in clear water while everyone else reached for a sweeter drink. In my first life, I mistook being included for being safe. In my second, I learned to ask who mixed the cup, who poured it, who needed me to swallow first, and what would happen if I simply set it down and walked away.